my question was going to be for you. I know, right? My question was going to be for you. How did you first react when you found out? But you found out about 10 minutes ago when I told you. So, how did you react when you found out? And what does it feel like to be on a banned book list?
I suspected it was coming. And I feel it is a badge of honor to be on that list. Instantly, I think of the books that get banned are those that are pushing, and those that are challenging us to think outside of what is normed to harm us. And so, you know, push out is about the criminalization of Black girls in schools. You're talking about race, gender, sexuality. I'm talking about all of it. I'm talking about that plus criminalization, plus. And so I think that they recognize that I am inviting a deep interrogation of some of these harmful conditions in our communities and the specific way that they impact Black girls and femmes. It means I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
And that's so true. That's exactly what Toni Morrison said when she found out one of her books was banned. She got a letter from a person in the Texas prison system, and they said, hey, did you know that one of your books, Paradise, was banned because they would incite a riot? And she's like, look at me. She's like, basically like, look at me starting some stuff up. There you go. That's exactly where I want to be. So that's exactly the response we expected. And I really want to start that question off by asking all of you, when did you first enter the conversation about banned books? Where was your touch point and your entry point, especially as writers and creators, and especially as folks who push forward books from diverse topics? Where was your entry point? I'll start with you, Eduardo.
My entry point, actually going back to the opening video that we saw, Dr. Marta Moreno Vega, my madrina, was one of the voices and emphasized that we're in the Arturo Alfonso Schomburg Research Center Library. I have a personal connection to Schomburg because he comes from Santurce, Barrio Obrero, which is where my family's from in Puerto Rico, a town that was founded by libertos, Puerto Ricans of African descent, of freed African descent. And my connection was a recent conversation I had with Dr. Marta Moreno Vega, Marta, because she and I, mostly initiated from her, feel that we're on the brink of a culture war. This is something very serious. This is not something that's just topical. This is not a hashtag. This is very real. Recently, Erykah Badu was on MSNBC, and she literally said, woke is code for Black. And people are using codified language to refer to people of color. We're living in an era right now where the power structures, which are mostly run by white men, are pumping propaganda and ideas to the masses. Let's go to some like old school hip hop math, the 85%, right? To force them into conflicts with us, right? We're putting out content that is critical of our role, our place, our reality here in the United States. And we need to brace ourselves. You know, oftentimes we live in this beautiful bubble of New York City. I had a conversation recently with someone from CBS News just this morning that the Latin, brown, Black community in New York City is so different from anywhere across the United States, to the extreme of like a lot of brown people using the N-word, which I don't agree with, right? To this Afro-Caribbean connection that we all have, right? From the Young Lords to the Black Panthers to the creation of hip hop. Black and brown have been together in this city for more than a century. So we have to brace ourselves. We're on the brink of a culture war. We have to be proactive. This conversation is important. My book isn't on a banned list yet, but I grew up in an era where I was reading comic books and my comics were confiscated from me, and now my books are being taught in public schools across the United States because of foundations like the Penn Faulkner Foundation, which buy our books and distribute them. My books are being taught throughout Puerto Rico because the University of Puerto Rico, through a grant from the Mellon Foundation, bought our books in an effort to reintroduce a dialogue and a discourse around our Afro-Latin heritage in Puerto Rico to defiantly address the colorism that exists within our own community. So it's a real conversation. We're in the midst of something that's incredibly important right now. We have to brace ourselves. She just found out 10 minutes ago. That's very real. I can find out 10 minutes from now. And what does that mean? Institutions like Schomburg, authors and creators like ourselves, have to brace ourselves for what's next. readers and supporters in this audience have to brace yourselves for what's next. They're literally taking our stories away, attempting to, but they won't, because you cannot capture or enslave or imprison an imagination, you know, and I think that's why this conversation, I feel, is so important.
Yeah, thank you for that. Joseph, as someone who has written a book about what looks like a black judge, you can talk about that a little bit. Right. As someone who's written about something that's inspired by Ketanji Brown, someone like that, who also had so much controversy around her appointment to the Supreme Court, you also have a touch point with this area of banned books. You have a touch point with knowing what it means to put out books that people might not want to see. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So really, and first of all, it's really heartwarming that all of you are here, because we really love to get together and talk about the fiction, but when it gets to real life, not so many people get together. So the fact that we're here talking about something that is real is really amazing. And my first experience really goes back to when I worked at Milestone. Milestone started in 1993, and one of the company's founding titles was called Blood Syndicate, and it was about a superpowered gang. And we had parents and parental organizations really having a problem with this book, writing letters to us, because back in the day, people would write you letters directly. There was no email, there was no Twitter, there was no Facebook. And, you know, it's called Blood Syndicate, so I'm not sure if it's for your 7-year-old, right? Maybe your 7-year-old, but it was about a superpowered gang, right? Flash forward to now, I'm a member of the board of directors for the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. And so last year, one of the major things that was happening with the fund, and our executive director, Jeff Trexler, was really spearheading this, was defending Maya Kobabe, the author and creator of the genderqueer graphic novel, right? Which has become the tip of the spear of this whole crusade, which is now including Jerry Craft's School Trip and the graphic novel adaptation of The Diary of Anne Frank. And so I don't know if you can find a day in America now where you don't read about a book ban. This morning, I open up the New York Times app, and what do I see? Llano County in Texas, right? They almost shut down their entire library system because there was a successful lawsuit that prevented 17 books from being removed. So they were just going to shut down all the libraries. And to Edgardo's point, I want you to think about what's happening now. They're not banning superhero stories. They're going for the jugular, which are the real life stories, or the stories that are close to real life. Why are they doing this? They're doing this because this is a criticism of the fallacy of American imperialism, right? Of the fallacy of whiteness as supremacy, right? And because we continue to win, and understand, when you are considered a threat, that's because you're winning. It's not because you're losing. We are continuing to make real life impact, and so they keep upping the ante. And the final version of that now is what I call the time machine process, where basically you want to eliminate history from books. You want to eliminate history from educational curriculums. So suddenly, the transatlantic slave trade, well, that didn't happen. That's a thing of fiction, right? I can prove it. It's not in the books. It's not in our libraries. So it didn't happen, right? So by eliminating these real touch points in history, they eliminate the eventual comeuppance of reparations. The government does not want to give reparations. It does not want to prepare the damages that it has done to all of the other people, all of the mutants in our society. So when they're going after queer people, when they're going after people of color, it's because they don't want the acknowledgement of the crimes because they don't want to pay the reparations.
It's so important that you mentioned, Joseph, about the erasure of history or rewriting of history. I would love to talk about this with you, Mike, over there. I mean, you're a history educator, and we heard from Ricardo say, you know, New York is a bubble in a way, and folks need to realize that this could be harming us as well. But you also want to realize that outside of New York City, there are places and parents and communities that are trying to get books off the shelves too. So it's not that far removed from us. As an educator, what has been your touch point?
So the interesting thing is, so I've taught not just in New York, I've taught in Texas, I've taught in Atlanta, Georgia. So I've seen, I'm teaching now about 13 years, so I've seen the gamut of like education and how it differs across the country. And I'm from California, so I've seen a wide range of America's education systems. And a lot of the books we discussed that are on that banned list, whether they're older books like To Kill a Mockingbird or more recent books, are all part of the discussion, especially as a teacher, right? Like, these come into play frequently, and the nice advantage of New York, and especially someone who has also had the advantage of working primarily with Black and brown administration, I've been so lucky and fortunate that I've kind of had kind of a whole lot of leeway and to teach how I want to teach. And I was a global history teacher. Currently I teach government economics, so you know, everything we talk about in government economics is very real. And the importance of, it's not even just talking about what happens in my scenarios, not just banned books, it's banned ideologies, right? Like, so much of what I talk about, I know how much I would have been banned frequently as a teacher. Like the amount of stuff I've taught, like even talk about Mansa Musa as technically being historically the wealthiest person alive would be considered false by so many people, right? But that's part of the history, I have to give you that. I have to give you every single aspect. I can't have a bias here, you need to see all the facets of life. And then currently with government, I have to show you the flaws with our government, right? Like you need to know these things because you're moving in the real world, you're going to colleges, you're about to experience things. And I have to prepare the students that I have who are predominantly Afro-Latino, predominantly West African, and a lot of Muslim students, that you are starting to encounter people who are not from your bubble anymore. And they are going to have judgments on you. They are going to judge you about all the books you've read, all the ideas you have, and shut that down. And I try and, especially for LGBTQ students, I'm considered a safe space for our school for that as a queer teacher. A lot of the LGBTQ students come out to me actually, and some of them feel brave enough to come out to their parents. And I'm like, hey, if you want to, that is on you, I'm supportive of you. But it's important that they themselves recognize that they would be banned in some scenarios as a person. And I know my books predominantly are LGBTQ Black femmes. Like, I had to remind myself I should probably make a male character at some point. But it's because of who has helped me so much in my life, who's inspired me, who's protected me so much, are Black LGBTQ femmes. And so a lot of the characters in my books are based on people I actually know. And so I know my book would be banned outright in tons of places, because all the Black femmes, they love each other, very sapphic love everywhere, and that wouldn't go well with cis hetero people that well. But I mean, I like what I write. I get to even get to share my book to some of the students who actually check things out, and they ask a lot of questions about their fears of the future and things that worry them every day about how well they'll be judged. And I do my best to encourage them to keep their voices heard and make sure that all their ideas are valid and that they matter. And I think that's the best we can do as an educator. But the cool thing is, having been teaching so long, some of my kids have kids, some of my students are teachers as well. So, you know, and I think the best inspirational story I have of just influence is there's someone who's a teacher, and she actually teaches white kids in Texas, and she gives them a lot of science ideologies, but she also gives them a lot of Black concepts with science as well. And one of the moms on the Facebook, I mean, this student now is in her late 20s, but she's a teacher. One of the moms, who's a white lady, said, she's like, oh, she's a fantastic teacher because she won Teacher of the Month. And she's like, she's a fantastic teacher. And I'm like, so in essence, that's always my goal. I'm hoping that I get to help you educate the world that you are going to have to live in. And whether that's telling people about banned books that you might not find, because she lives in Texas, Houston, Texas, where we all know is a hotbed of banning all kinds of stuff. So the fact that she is approaching white students with a black ideology and influencing them where white parents actually find what she has to say matters, that's the goal here in a sense, right? Like this is change that can actually happen, and it may be small, but I try to make it happen in my classroom every day.